Welcome to the next episode of Mic'd Up with ChiroUp. Today's episode is going to be in three pieces. However, I kind of link those together with one common theme. And the theme is three fears holding chiropractors back. This is going to be an interesting podcast, to say the least. I have another guest on the episode, which is completely out of character. However, a few weeks ago, I was at the Parker Miami seminar, where I love going to conferences like that. I love hearing about new technology, the newest and greatest things as far as research and artificial intelligence, and just great places to talk shop with like-minded providers and practice management strategies with other people around the U.S. And yes, those conversations happened, but something else kept on surfacing kind of over and over again. And it wasn't the technology, it wasn't the documentation, it wasn't compliance, it was fear. And it was a really weird thing. It wasn't fear of failure, it was fear of change. Now, I know, and you know, that that's a real thing. However, as a chiropractor, we're kind of mavericks out there. We're willing to try new things, whether it's treatments or marketing or new softwares or whatever it is to help build our practice. But one thing I was seeing over and over again is that chiropractors that I was talking to were making decisions based solely on the fears they carry. And I just think it was interesting. So today's podcast, I tried to, and I think we did a pretty good job of kind of rallying together three fears that I think every chiropractor experiences. And then I went and found some solutions to those. And I want to share those with you. I think they're really good and kind of got me out of the box as far as understanding how I can overcome my fears in practice, whether it's personal or professional, and then how we can help more patients with solving those fears. And as always, we're going to have the first fear as far as clinical, and I think there's always the fear of missing something, the fear of recommending the wrong treatment, the fear of looking at an MRI or an X-ray and kind of wondering whether you're treating the pathology or maybe the movement that created the pathology. And I found a case that I had done maybe about 2 months ago, and it was really kind of a fascinating case because it was two patients, same injury, same body habitus, they were the same women. They were both 45-year-old, highly athletic women that had the exact same diagnosis. But the fear I want to discuss with you is the conversation I had to have with an orthopedic surgeon. And it really had to challenge the way him and I normally do things. And I think that it came out smelling like a rose. However, I want to discuss that with you and how that can really help build your practice or take away from your practice, depending on how you frame that conversation. Now, the second fear that I'm going to talk about is not the fear of the softwares that we have in our practice, but the fear of changing the softwares we have in our practice. Because after talking with literally hundreds of chiropractors in Miami, I realized something extremely surprising. And that's that most doctors don't stay with their EHR because it's the best. They just stay because it feels risky to change. So I actually brought on a guest for today, and I'm going to bring on Dr. Rachel O'Brien, who spent years helping chiropractors, is a chiropractor, and has incorporated EHRs into her own practice to navigate this decision with you. And we're going to kind of unpack why so many doctors dislike their software, but never leave it. And then finally, the third fear. And this is the fear of upsetting your patients. Now, I know that sounds kind of interesting. However, it's amazing how often we avoid difficult conversations with our patients. And we do it because we assume our patients are going to react negatively. And I'm going to share with you how our practice, Premier Rehab here, implemented a compliant 3% credit card surcharge. Now, it's a fear to charge your patients more. I get it, but it also gives me anxiety every month when I open a bill from the credit card processing company for $1,000, for $1,200 every single month. And our patients barely notice. And I'm going to give you the 5 things that we did that really every clinic should consider before making this kind of change. So to kind of round things up before we get started, we're going to have 3 different conversations, but we're going to have three very similar conversations about fears, whether it's clinical, whether it's emotional, whether it's financial, and we're going to tie these things together to make sure that we have a very good podcast for you today. So let's get started with the first fear. And that first fear is my biggest fear, just to be 100% honest, and that is clinical. I always have this deep-seated thing in my gut whenever I see a new patient that I'm going to miss something. And I can get lulled into complacency when I'm seeing, 100 people a week, 150 people a week. I'm so drilled in. I've got my musculoskeletal lens on and those glasses on. I've got blinders on, and I'm just, riding through this parking lot of patients that have musculoskeletal problems. But sometimes we have pathology. Sometimes we have serious things going on, or things that maybe we can't treat. And I think that is one thing that I always get concerned about in my physical exam is, am I getting everything accomplished? So what I think that I'd like to cover is that the diagnosis, when we come down to the end tissue that gave way or is causing symptoms, I think that it's really hiding in a story of the patient's habits, hobbies, activities, sports, occupation, whatever it may be. And I think that's where we kind of get lost, is that we spend all this time to come up with a diagnosis. Then we have a bucket of things that we do for that diagnosis. I do this treatment, I do this modality, I do these exercises, I use this ADL advice, whatever it may be. But we forget about all the things that created that diagnosis in the first place. So I want to share with you an incredible story. This is two patients, but it really is the exact same story, and even the exact same shoulder. And one of these patients was already scheduled for surgery. They both had persistent shoulder pain despite excellent care, and actually excellent care from a PT down the street who does phenomenal work, another chiro who I know well, who does excellent work, and two orthos and a primary care mixed in. It sounds like a joke that I'm getting ready to say, but not a joke at all. These cases reminded me of something that I think we all forget, and that sometimes the most important rotator cuff muscle when it comes to shoulder pain is the one we examine the least, because both of these patients came to me with the diagnosis, at least in their head, they have rotator cuff syndrome. And one of those was getting ready to have surgery to get one of those fixed. And I want to cover three research papers that I think is going to maybe change the way you think about rotator cuff syndrome and highlight the subscapularis. Now, remember, the subscapularis is 3 times as big as the other 3 rotator cuff muscles combined. That's big. It doesn't make it Superman, but it does make it susceptible to overuse. I mean, if you think about it, if that supraspinatus gets pinched and is inflamed and it becomes weak, something else needs to help out, and that's the subscapularis. So both of these women, I think one was 42, one was 45. However, both of them come in with right-sided shoulder pain. Let's talk about the 42-year-old first, because that is the one that was actually on the docket to have surgery. And I gave her my 2 favorite subscapular syndrome orthopedic tests, the bear hug and the belly press. And let's be honest, I think there was a sports health paper in 2020-ish. However, when you use these 2 tests in combination, which is the bear hug and the belly press, these are the best things for evaluating subscapularis pathology. And what they found is that if you want to identify this with a 96% probability, that these 2 tests are going to knock this one out. But they were kind of so-so, meaning I did it. Yeah, the shoulder hurt a little bit, but really wasn't weak. And it really didn't cause any more pain the patient was already in doing any other active or passive range of motion. So I wasn't that impressed. However, if you look further into the condition references within ChiroUp, you'll see that there are 2 other tests that you can do to identify weakness. And when you have all 4 of these tests positive, we really are just as likely to see a rotator cuff tear as an MRI. And that one that I did next was the internal rotation lag sign. The internal rotation lag sign, if you haven't seen it, get on ChiroUp, watch the video. This is going to put the subscapularis in maximum contraction. And if you have the muscle in maximum contraction, meaning the arm is fully internal rotated behind the back, humeral extension and internal rotation, and you try to hold it there, that patient doesn't like that very much because they had a rotator cuff tear in there, and it's going to show weakness. And then also the lift-off test, which is the test right before that. Now, she did have weakness and pain in the internal rotation lag sign, which led me to believe we have some weakness in here. But here's what fascinates me, is because I've got two patients that are thin, athletic, middle-aged females, no trauma, no differences built side to side, right versus left. Both are right-sided subscapularis tears and extremely healthy. And I thought to myself, that's interesting. Most tendinopathies are due to poor metabolic health, not just repetitive stress. It's not the activity, but the ability to heal from activity. And these were smart people that had rest days built in. But their sports gave it away. Their sports gave away essentially the diagnosis long before the MRI did. If you look at postural stresses and repetitive stresses, these things matter, but also think about the things they're doing on a regular basis. Elite swimmers are humans, essentially, who repeat the same motions thousands upon thousands of times. But here's what fascinates me. Neither of these patients look like a rotator cuff tear patient. They were thin, athletic, middle-aged females, took rest days, knew about nutrition, no trauma associated with their case, no differences of build side to side, right versus left, and extremely healthy. And the reason this looked different or fascinated me is that most tendinopathies, most rotator cuff partial and full thickness tears due to repetitive stress are due to poor metabolic health. It's not the repetitive stress. It's not the activity. It's the ability to heal from that activity. And both of these athletes understood that and took active strategies as far as nutrition, as far as rest days, as far as sleep. I mean, they were well-oiled machines. But their sports gave away their diagnosis long before my orthopedic test or the MRI did. And what I mean by that is that every single person has a weak link, or they're going to expose a weak link when you start to do something hundreds or thousands of times. Now, if you're a painter, if you're an electrician, if you're a CrossFit athlete, if you're dad coaching baseball, a mom lifting towers, it doesn't matter who you are. But in this case, they were elite swimmers who were bringing their arm over the head and pulling water thousands upon thousands of times. Something is going to fail. Now, the MRI confirmed it. However, when you look at an MRI, ask yourself a simple question. Am I treating what I see, or am I treating what created what I see? That is a very different mindset. I'm going to try to patent this, but it's probably not going to work. I call it the peanut butter and jelly theory, because peanut butter and jelly, to make a great sandwich, go together, and it's a phenomenal sandwich. However, they're not causative. Peanut butter doesn't create jelly. They just go together. And as clinicians, we love cause and effect. However, in this case, specifically, I have a patient with a type 2 acromion due to repetitive stress. Now, if you have a patient who is trying to pull water and the big muscle that's holding that glenohumeral joint down when you go through arm elevation, flexion, and abduction isn't working very well, that humeral head is going to knock into your acromion hundreds upon thousands of times. That's the problem. And as current research shows you, is that when you find those anatomical findings, they are associated with subscapularis tears. But here's what the research tells us. Where is the tear? And where the tear is matters, because what we find, and we found it in these cases, is that tear is on the articular side, or the undersurface of the subscapularis, not on the top or the bursal surface of that problem. So what this patient was going to go through is they were going to go through a process with an orthopedic surgeon to shave down the acromion. The acromion it's just an innocent bystander. It's creating secondary impingement, but it's not the problem. The problem is strengthening of the subscapularis and healing. So what we know from this case is that rehabilitation matters. Rehabilitation is going to be more important than post-surgical rehabilitation, because if we can just start to strengthen the problem, instead of focusing on the image, because the image is telling a different story, saying that you have a type 2 acromion, it's creating problems in the subacromial space and all the other problems associated with anterior impingement syndrome. But as a clinician, if we can optimize serratus anterior activation, lower trapezius control, we can start to eccentrically load the shoulder, and we can improve or address the mechanics that have contributed to this pathology, we can prevent her from having surgery. And the reason I bring this up is that I had to have that conversation not with the patient, which I did also, but with the orthopedic surgeon. And I didn't say, hey, this surgery is a bad idea. I called him up and said, would you give this patient 3 months? I understand what's going on, and I understand the need for surgery in cases where we have a bony structure impinging on the rotator cuff. However, what I'd like to try is exactly what I told you, some eccentric control, some closed kinetic chain control exercises for the shoulder. I'm going to have this patient who's highly motivated do these exercises. We don't have any kind of significant weakness. While we do have some due to a full thickness tear in the subscapularis, let's see if we can strengthen that muscle enough to prevent this erratic motion of the glenohumeral joint and prevent her from having any more shoulder pain and, of course, the surgery. And he was very excited to have the conversation, but I think more excited to help the patient solve the problem herself. She was able to do that. She is currently not in any shoulder pain. However, I don't have her back to swimming quite yet, so we'll see how that goes. So I hope this brings to fact one of the biggest fears that we have as far as clinical, using the right orthopedic test. But the next part of that needs to be the fear of talking with other healthcare providers. It's okay to get on the phone and talk to them. Send them a letter, write them a letter, making sure you have good communication. That's not marketing. That's having a conversation with your patient's best interest at hand. If we are accusatory, if we are confrontational, it's probably not going to be a great experience for anyone involved. However, if we can work together as a team and place the patient above my business model, above my thoughts, above my education, and say, what can I do to this patient to help her along her journey? And if it's having the ideas, thoughts, procedures, interventions of other healthcare provisions, as long as we're all moving in the right direction, the only person that's going to win is going to be the patient. All right. Now for the next section. The next session is going to go over the biggest fears of a chiropractor with switching softwares in your practice. This has been something I have not been afraid of, and not because of obviously the ChiroUp software, but before we even had ChiroUp, we had switched 4 times as far as EHRs because I cannot stand inefficiencies. So in this conversation today, I realize that I have a pretty skewed view on how to switch softwares, but I brought an expert in here who is not only a doctor of chiropractic, but has owned her own practice and has also worked with 2 of the top EHR companies in doing business development. I'm going to bring in here Rachel O'Brien, and she is going to go through, we'll have a little conversation first, but really the 7 biggest fears chiropractors have about switching EHRs. All right, so there comes a point in almost every chiropractor's career when they look at their EHR and think, there has to be something better. But realistically, like as a provider, that's when the real internal questions start, meaning how much work is this going to be? What happens to the thousands of patient records I've accumulated over the years? Is my staff going to hate me for making this change? And perhaps the biggest question of all, what if I make the switch and realize I made the wrong decision? Because the grass is always greener. Now, these aren't technical questions, they're emotional ones. And as for many chiropractors, it's not the software that keeps them where they are. It's kind of that uncertainty. It's the fear of disrupting the practice they spent years building. So today, we're going to attempt to separate some fact from fiction. Joining me today is Dr. Rachel O'Brien. She's a Logan graduate. She's owned her own chiropractic clinic. She spent years helping chiropractors navigate one of these biggest operational decisions they'll ever make, switching EHRs. And from her experience at another top chiropractic EHR in her current role at ChiroUp, she has heard every concern, every hesitation, every story chiropractors tell themselves about why now isn't the right time to switch. And today we're going to try to separate a little bit of myth from reality. Dr. Rachel O'Brien, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
She has to be here. I made her be here. So this is purely come into this room right now and let's figure this out together. No, I'm kidding. I think this is going to be a fun conversation because we're going to dive into maybe some broad questions at the beginning. And then I do have scripted 7 questions that I do want to ask you about switching EHRs, because as a product rep and as a business development expert, I want to know which of these fears surrounding switching EHRs are legitimate and which ones are largely myths. Which ones kind of keep doctors stuck in the systems they've already outgrown. And even if you're thinking about changing EHRs, what do you need to know about making one of the most important operational decisions for your practice?
Yeah, there's not a bad fear to have. Every fear is completely valid and unfortunately more common than not. It puts a huge emphasis on the kind of investment you're making for your clinic, hence why this business decision should never be taken lightly. The biggest fear I hear almost every day is how much work will it take and what if my staff gets mad at me? And I think you and I both, Dr. Steele, can attest that owners are never opposed to hard work. It's not a walk in the park to own. And it's truly what you put into it. So if you're willing to adopt and comply with the training that's been carefully built, it'll be much easier than you think. We guarantee that there is one thing in your staff's day-to-day that's a headache for them. You just have to figure out what that is. So get them involved in the onboarding process, allow them to ask any questions, and give them the small tasks to adopt the platform. And that'll also give them the autonomy to learn the functionality that they need to just to make their lives a bit easier. And they'll be able to see the positive impact on that firsthand.
Yeah, so I've owned our practice now for maybe a decade or so. And I used to think owning a practice was one of those things that, man, as soon as you own a business, you've made it. Like life is gravy after that. And then I realized there's other things that need to happen. But one thing that I have realized is the hardest thing to do is to manage staff. And if your staff doesn't like something, it creates a big problem. So I do see that a lot. And I think one of the other mistakes that I see on why people don't switch is because they go based on features. So they think about, does this have two-way texting or does this have voice to chart? But really it comes down to workflow. And that's one of the things that created the ChiroUp EHR, because features, especially today's world with vibe coding, features are easy to create, they're easy to market, but really it's the workflow that determines whether your day feels efficient or really exhausting for you or your staff, because every extra click, every duplicate entry, every time you have to jump from one piece of software to another, you're creating what we call tech debt. It's really the hidden interest you pay every single day in lost time, added frustration, unnecessary complexity. And these are the friction points. These are the friction points why Sally in your office is exhausted at the end of the day, or you're tired of writing down post-it notes of information, because every time you have to document something twice, every time you have to re-enter patient demographics that already exist somewhere else, you have to bounce between an EHR, an exercise software, an insurance verification, a scheduling platform, a patient messaging app, just to complete one visit. It really, everything kind of goes to a halt. I talk with people like, how long does it take you to do a note? 2 minutes. That's really fast. Some say 10 minutes. That's probably more average. What other things had to go into that note that you're not even thinking about as a doctor? That's the workflow that we're talking about, because none of these in isolation feel like a major problem on its own, but together it quietly steals hours from your week. And then with all the manual entries, increase opportunities for error and kind of chip away at your and your staff's joy of practicing. So I guess the question that I want to ask you is that, how do you eliminate these friction points? You know, if you can eliminate a couple of these friction points, how much time are these doctors saving every single week? And then ask your staff, if I solve this problem for you, what would you do with it?
Yeah, one of the biggest misconceptions is that we measure a patient encounter by the 10 to 15 minutes that we're treating them in our room. The reality, though, is that we should be measuring the entire workflow surrounding that visit from the moment the patient schedules an appointment ultimately. Insurance has to be verified, intake forms have to be delivered, documentation has to be completed, billing codes have to be assigned, exercise prescribed, so on and so forth. Everything that has to be done in your workflows from the moment the patient's out the door to their car. So every time you leave one piece of software to complete another task, you've introduced another another friction point into your day. So let's take exercise prescription as an example. Either your staff combined are spending about, you and your staff combined are spending about 10 minutes additionally to prescribe exercises, find a way to print these lists of exercises for your patient and documenting everything just so you can get paid. Or your patients are being shown these exercises in office, forgetting them as soon as they walk out the door, and compliance goes down the toilet for those patients. So it may add a couple of minutes to each visit, but over the course of 25, 30 patients a day, those minutes add up fast, and time is money. Either way, if your systems can't work efficiently inside your note, or they're inconvenient for your patients to access, it's hard for your staff to keep up with those workflows, or you're going to hemorrhage that time and money due to inefficiency and non-compliance for your patients. So now let's multiply that same concept across every workflow in your practice. We've got insurance verification, appointment reminders, scheduling, documentation, coding, billing, patient communication, collections. Every process may only consume a minute or two and may feel very minuscule at the time, but together they require as much time outside the treatment room as it does inside. So that's the question every chiropractor should be asking themselves. How much time does it actually take my practice to care for one patient from the moment they schedule a visit to checking out and walking out to their car? If your answer is only the time you spend face-to-face with that patient, you're missing half of that equation. And the true cost of inefficiency is all of the invisible work that accumulates throughout the day, leaving you at your computer long after your patient has gone home.
That's a really interesting point, because this is all the things that happen, after you've made a change in a software. But what do you think is the actual catalyst that begins? So like for me as a provider, like what are the things that you hear from a doctor's like, the reason I'm switching is because of A, B, or C? I mean, is it more efficient charting? Is it speedier clinical processes? Because one of my thoughts, I'm not saying it's true or not, is that I thought that's what people wanted. They wanted speedier charting. They wanted the ability to have an integrated clearinghouse or whatever it was. But I think in my first year, one of the things that I've heard, and I'm just curious on your interpretation of this, is most people just didn't feel like the companies that they were doing business with had their best interest in mind. They weren't developing the things they wanted to do. And even though they had all those services, there was just a disconnect in how good of a relationship they had with those software companies. Do you ever hear that?
Yeah, and that's interesting that you bring that up. No one wakes up wanting to switch their EHR. I mean,
or create an EHR, just to be honest with you.
Or create one. That's right. No one wakes up wanting to switch softwares and making that kind of wave in your practice, especially with staff. But I usually see people that start to ask themselves, who are you doing business with? What are they doing to give back to the profession? Do you trust that they're reliable? I mean, people don't buy the iPhone for camera, Siri, or the integrated apps. I mean, ultimately, those are all features. You're buying the Apple ecosystem, so all of your devices can work fluidly together. Your MacBook works with your iPad, that works with your phone. Same thing with a new EHR. Features can come and go every day. There will always be something new, something fancy, but what matters is if you trust the partnership you're getting into. And ultimately, will they deliver quality products within that ecosystem of the platform that help you grow and scale as your profession changes? Will they provide a white glove, true partnership kind of support that reflects the company's morals and ethics? Will they adapt as the times change? Because you and I both know chiropractic changes by the day, it feels. Or do they just seem to kind of want your money? So these are all things EHR consumers need to be asking themselves. And I love when people come to me saying that they have been thinking of that, or they've been asking themselves these questions, because that's something any business owner should do.
Yeah, I 100% agree. People that, if anyone sends me a text message and it's green, they're using an Android device, I'm like, how do you even live in this world? I'm kidding. But so before we jump into kind of the questions that I kind of scripted out, I do have one more thing, I guess, as far as the myths go, because if there's one person on this team that represents kind of the voice of the customer, it's you. Because we spend a lot of time listening to the chiropractors who have chose us, meaning they're already a subscriber. But I kind of want to shift things a little bit, and I want to hear from the people who don't choose us. And those are the people that you get to talk to, because some of the most valuable feedback that we get actually comes from the doctors who walk away, who decided not to switch, who never schedule a demo. And I think this is the part of the segment that I get kind of excited for, because I get a chance to talk with all the teammates here at ChiroUp, and everyone has a different idea of what's the most important thing that we should do. And really, it's all important. But let's put you on the hot seat to maybe get some more information on all the chiropractors you've talked with over the years. You really have developed a unique perspective on what they're thinking and what we should do to help these people become a customer of ChiroUp. And I want to kind of dive into those perspectives and look through maybe a lens that you see the profession in. But let's start with the biggest question of all. If so many chiropractors are so frustrated with their current software, why do so many of them stay? What are the real fears that people have in switching softwares? And is this a true fear or is it a myth?
Well, fortunately for us, most of the things people fear when switching an EHR or thinking about it are not reality, but more so myths. So many chiropractors believe these myths to be true when it comes to switching their electronic health record system ultimately.
Okay. So then if we had to boil it down, and we said, like, to get on the phone with someone, what's the biggest myth that you hear preventing someone from switching?
Biggest fear is that they're going to lose all their patient data and they need someone to upload all their old SOAP notes into their new platform.
Yeah. And I've switched many. People think it's some magical process. You need all your notes, obviously. However, you just need a way to find those. Switching from, I'll just say 3 major EHRs, because that's what we've had in the last 7 years before switching to the ChiroUp EHR. You get like a 17,000 page PDF, or even one is just all individual PDFs. Luckily, in today's world, you put them in a secure fashion on Google Drive, and you can search for those immediately and pull up all those SOAP notes. So that's one of the things that I always hear. I'm like, that's so easy to do. Like, if you need that record, it's always there. What's one of the biggest surprises you've heard from chiropractors after switching?
How much time and money efficiency saves. I think a lot of chiropractors are stuck in their ways. I mean, we're humans. That's just our nature. We get comfortable with the flow of things, and sometimes it's hard for us to admit that it may be outdated. So efficiency can save so much time, and I think that's the biggest surprise a lot of chiropractors start to experience. Yeah,
I see that all the time. I always call it the Target experience, that you could literally buy everything you need from Target, but you don't. You want everything in one ecosystem, but there are sometimes you need something better as far as a different shirt or a different thing that Target doesn't carry. So it's good to have everything in one space, but sometimes it's good to have integrations built in. One of the things that's interesting about ChiroUp, as far as the payment processing and the clearing houses, is that's not us. Like, we're not Trizetto. Right. However, we build it all into our system where it all feels like you're in one system to save time and energy. And really, it comes down to reporting. Reporting in a chiropractic world, understanding when money comes in, when money is posted, when money is billed out. It's a complex game that we play, but we want those dollars to come in. What's the most common objection you hear when trying to connect with chiropractors? So I know my staff is trained to not talk to you, not you specifically, but outside sales reps. I mean, what's the most common objection that you get in trying to get a hold of a chiropractor?
Typically, it's that the chiropractor's treating, but sometimes I will get the stragglers that are trained very, very well. My chiropractor doesn't talk to sales reps on the phone, which, I mean, I can applaud those doctors because I also trained my staff to do the same thing. So no bad feelings there. But I typically like to build relationships with those front desk people. It does kind of seem to get the wall down and make it a priority for them. Allow them to feel some autonomy with the decision, but also speak their truth. What's the biggest bottleneck that they see right now with their workflows, and how can we solve those?
Well, that's the first 6 months of the EHR. Doctors bought it and staff hated it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because the staff hated it. The staff didn't want change. And then once they actually went through the onboarding, like, oh, this is awesome. But doctors buy stuff. staff kicks it out the door. So making sure everybody's in the same board or same page. What about in all honesty, for transparency, what's the most common regret people have had once they sign up for the software?
I think a lot of doctors and their staff underestimate the implementation and onboarding process. I mean, you can't snap your fingers and expect everyone to just know how to use such a robust system. It takes time, and it takes the ability to be coached and the capacity to be able to learn new things.
Yeah, I mean, we thought everybody was going to just sign up and within a week they go on board, and we're finding now between 40 and 41 days is average for someone to go on board. But it does take the staff to get on board and to go through some onboarding calls. But once we can do that, we have a very simple process to make sure that happens for every single person. What features impress? Let's talk about the doctors first. What features impress the doctors the most?
Probably the AI tools, the AI voice to chart and the SOAP note speed with everything being intuitive. While being audit ready, insurance ready. It's not undercutting compliance. And I think a lot of the docs that say my notes take 2-3 minutes, if they needed to survive an audit, would they?
Yeah, that's big. Having the confidence to sign a note and know that the insurance is going to pay for it. And if something else happens, you have evidence to back up what you did and why you did it. What about the staff? What does the staff love the most?
From what I've heard and teams that I've talked to, the team chat's really popular, and the two-way texting patient communication features. I know when I was in practice, one of my biggest things were the notorious sticky note on my desk. You need to update these codes. You need to add this modifier. And I know I hated it. I know staff did as well. So team chat solves that issue. And then, of course, two-way texting. How could you not want two-way text? I mean, some clinics may not, but two-way texting with patients, just ease of communication. Today's world, no one wants to talk on the phone.
Yeah. And storing it in the patient notes, so you know all the conversation that you have with that patient. One thing about the team chat is that we have a billing company that we work with, and my biller is on our team chat. So it's so nice because she can tell me, hey, you billed this code, or it wasn't diagnosis pointing correctly, or you missed this diagnosis, or you missed a charge, or why didn't you do this? But then she can link it to the actual note, and that way I can click it, I can see what she said, and then I can go directly to that page or transaction or whatever it is, and make a change and let her know that it's been updated. Just being integrated in the same system is good. And obviously, there's things like Slack and Teams that can do all those things, but when you can start to work within the actual app, it improves the same thing we talked about, the workflow. What about patients? What do patients notice the most about a change in the EHR?
I think patients are seeing more of a white glove patient experience. That's ultimately, I mean, having an online portal where you have full access to your exercises with the videos, and you have clarity to when your appointments are. You can pay online if you need to. I think those add to the patient experience overall, which of course improves compliance.
Yeah. I think that's the last of my questions. I think one of the biggest joys that I've had in ChiroUp is talking with individual providers when I go to shows, when I go to different conventions, and you get to hear about how a software changes them. But the second one is the incorporation of chiropractors at ChiroUp. Obviously, we're a software company. However, we have, 6 chiropractors that work at ChiroUp, sales, biz dev, research, and then administrative roles. And that's one of the most fun things, is because you hear about a sales tactic from a salesperson, but then you listen to how a chiropractor would sell to a chiropractor. You hear about how a software developer would solve a problem with software or reporting, and they're like, that's not going to work. Then you have a chiropractic perspective on how that reporting should work. So I've had just a great time working and listening and understanding how different chiropractors see all these pieces impact a workflow. So thanks for your input, Rachel. I think that this is going to be one of those continual learning processes to learn what chiropractors want, and hopefully we can bring those things to fruition.
Yeah, well, thank you for forcing me to be here. Just kidding. Thank you for having me. It was fun.
All right, now for the last part of this segment, and I'm a big believer in the clinical aspect of not only this podcast, but also my practice at Premier Rehab. And to implement a business side to this podcast has been tough for me because we've been doing this for so long. Dr. Burleson's been in practice for, 87 years now. I've been doing this for about 16 years. And it really has been kind of a well-oiled machine. And the reason I say that is we have this well-oiled machine that really hasn't been looked at in a while because it's just worked. I mean, we take care of the patients. The staff treats that works with the patients and works with the insurances and co-pays. And we don't question many of the things that we do because we've just done it for so long and it works well. However, let me give you one story and one change that we've made that has made a significant, real impact on our bottom line and a positive impact on our bottom line and really just improving the margins on our profit and our practice. And we did this by implementing a credit card surcharge. Now, I know what you're thinking, and for years I viewed merchant processing fees as just another business expense. But I really started to add those up and watch those over the months and realize it's costing us between $1,200 and $1,300 every single month that just comes out as an expense. So we did implement a surcharge and we gave our patients a little bit of notice on this. And in all honesty, nobody cared. In fact, more people were surprised we weren't charging one to begin with. So if you're ever considered, doing this kind of thing in your own practice, I'm going to give you my recommendations on doing this. Now, this is purely opinion. I've only done this once as far as making the transition, but it went really smooth. So I want to bring that to your attention and give you some options on how to do that for you in your practice. The first is give your patients advance notice. Be transparent with this. We use a simple sign explaining the upcoming charge and gives them a time or a little bit of a couple days or even weeks to choose another payment method if they prefer. I can tell you right now, and this is just based off talking with the staff, no one started bringing cash or check to the office that didn't before. Now, second, this is very important. You have to know, and your front desk needs to know, what cards cannot be surcharged. Generally, debit cards and most HSA and FSA cards cannot be added onto a surcharge. And then you also want to verify your state laws and work with a payment processor to ensure that you're applying these rules correctly. Now, this is very simple to do. Talk with your state association as a separate plug. If you're not a part of your state association, you need to be. These are the people allowing you to practice every year. I always find it interesting when people say, oh, I don't agree with this, or I don't want to spend that much time. I don't care. Your state association is the reason you have a place to practice. And if you're not spending the time, the energy, the money on legislating for your business and your profession, you're getting served at those Senate meetings. So making sure that you talk to your state association, make sure this is okay for payment processing, but also if you're not a part of your state association, please do so. Now, third, educate your staff. Make sure they understand which cards qualify and which ones don't. And the reason I say this is because some people just don't understand the difference between a credit card and a debit card. They don't understand HSA and FSA cards. So have a little cheat sheet for your staff to make sure they can understand what these terms mean and how to apply charges if they have one of these types of cards. Fourth, don't include surcharges in provider compensation. This is not additional income. It's simply recovering your processing costs. Now, your EHR practice management system should be able to separate these fees from provider production or collections, or however you determine that in your office. However, if you start to add on 3%, to every single provider, and that's how you actually pay them on a monthly basis, you're going to be losing that money because that money is going somewhere. You need that money to pay your merchant processing fees at the end of the month. Now, finally, this is the most important one. This is the biggest lesson that I learned upon doing this, is wondering why I didn't do it sooner. And in all honesty, it was a simple operational change that recovered thousands of dollars each year. And the only reason we didn't do it before is because we've never done it in the past. So rethink all the things you're doing in your practice, how you collect money, how you bill out, and do that on a regular basis, because sometimes, very similar to something like this, that you're improving profitability is not from seeing more patients. It's about keeping more of what you've already earned. So I hope this was a lesson for you just as much as me. And I think that this is one of those things that I've always think about seeing more patients, getting more new patients, but sometimes we have to think about how we can improve the margins from the patients we're already seeing. Now, I just made a call to action as far as joining your state association. I also want to have another call to action with this ending of the podcast, and it's come out and see us. That Dr. Burrowsman and myself are making concerted effort to get out more this year and in the years following. I know I'm going to be in the MCM event with Kevin Cushey's group in Sonoma. If you haven't heard of that group, I highly recommend it. It's a group of highly entertaining, highly professional, and hungry providers looking to grow their practices. I'll be in Chicago, Nashville, Tennessee, San Diego, Green Bay. I know Dr. Burrowsman's in Branson. I think he's going to South Africa, and he's also going to be in Alaska. I'm sure there's a couple more places he's going to be. But if you go to chiroup.com and you go under the resources tab, you can see all the places we are at the end of this year. If you can't see us in person, that's fine. Go on Instagram because I want to give you another fun thing that I learned about ChiroUp is that we are the top followed chiropractic Instagram account. That's interesting. And I had to ask why. Why would people follow us? And really, it's two-tier. Is that one, we give clinical tips like everything else, but also we give industry promotional stories for your business. So you can take a lot of our information that we're putting out there for you, but you can also reuse that for your business to help get the word about chiropractic and how we're changing the perception of chiropractic through evidence-based care. At the end of this, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you're listening to this podcast, we really do encourage you to hit the follow button so you'll never miss another episode. And by following, you'll be the first to know when we release new content. And you'll have access to our entire library of episodes. Thanks again for listening, and I'll get back to you next month.